So Gerry, describe the moment you found out that you were being presented with an award on Surprise Surprise.
It was a surprise, and it was something I definitely was not expecting. I didn't think that there would be any recognition for what I had done, and I didn't think that the RYA would give me a gift like they have given me, an award that they have given me also. So in essence it has been a massive surprise.
And how did it feel to be the winner of the first ever RYA Sailability Personal Endeavour Award, which is inspired by you?
I feel tremendously proud. I think it's a recognition of what I have achieved. I think it's also good that it came from the RYA, because what it means is that for many deaf people, it will give them the inspiration to hopefully achieve their goals and break the barriers which maybe are impeding them from achieving their goals.
So how were you first introduced to sailing?
My first experience of sailing was when I was only 2 years old. My father, he was a very keen sailor himself, and he used to take me sailing on a GP14, which is a small dinghy. After that we moved up to a keelboat, and we used that for many years, I think probably up until I was around about 10 years of age, and that was almost every week, whether it was through the winter or through the summer. So through the summer I would help my dad maintain the boat, sand the boat down, varnish the boat, paint the boat, and it was that really got my interest. And so I used to spend a lot of time, particularly over the summer holidays. We used to go sailing round Rothesay. It's one of the small islands on the west coast of Scotland. Through the summer holidays we used to go through sailing almost every single day. Spent my whole summers there, so it really kind of snowballed from that.
What inspired you to take on the challenge of sailing around the world?
When I was sailing with my father, I think round about that period I was round about the age of 13, and I couldn't write, I couldn't understand written English, and my father was obviously deeply concerned about this, because little things like the names of a street were things that were not accessible for me. So my father decided that what we would do is we would move down to England to a school for the deaf, which was based in York. It's called Boston Spa, and they very much advocate what's called the oral tradition, the oral teaching method. And that probably from that point, that's where I didn't see my father as much, because I was in boarding school. My father felt it was very important for me to have access to a good education. Hence the reason why I went to Boston Spa, because I wanted to develop my my written English and my reading English. At that time I felt as though I was very lost, I was very isolated, I was very much on my own, and I very much missed sailing. That was one of my biggest misses. And the head teacher took me to the library almost every single day, 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, for 30 minutes each day, to try and improve my access to written English. And it was something I felt was really difficult. Now, I can't remember exactly how long or what happened, but there was about a period of about 18 months later. That's when the penny kind of dropped in terms of me accessing English. I started to pick it up. My English was improving. And then I think it was actually at that point I decided one day I'm going to sail around the world.
And how do you prepare for something like that?
There was a lot of organisation involved in such a voyage, and as time was coming closer for the sailing off day, I had to make sure that all the electrics were okay, I had all the provisions, and once I felt as though I was comfortable with what I had, that was when I eventually set sail.
And how was it when you said goodbye to your family?
Yeah, that was very tough. I had a massive lump in my throat that day. Particularly difficult. 2 days after I set sail, I just burst down in tears. Broke down in tears. I think that's when it really hit me that was me. I am embarking on this voyage, and there was a question mark hanging over whether I would be successful, because it is such a massive journey, and I had left my family and I knew that they would be concerned about me. But that second day in the boat was probably one of the toughest.
Without hearing, how do you communicate with the outside world? For example, in a Mayday situation?
Well, I rely on technology, so I use a laptop, and there is a particular software which I use, it's called Predict Wind. This is really fantastic software. So I use that to help me predict the weather, and that would give me 2 days in advance. So twice a day it would download the information in terms of the weather that I might be approaching. So if there was an emergency, it has what's called a black box. You press the black box, and what that does is that sends a message straight over to my family back home that I am in a Mayday situation, and then from there we had a plan of action put in place where they would contact the Coast Guard. I also had a technology called EPRIB, and similarly, if you press the button on that, then it sends a signal and it alerts other boats in that area. Safety for me was always a massive concern. One of probably my most overriding concern was safety at all times, but I'm here, and so everything's went smoothly.
So how much do you rely on your other senses while you're sailing?
Because of my deafness, eye contact is always something I've relied on in terms of communication or just making sense of the world. And also we're very adept or very sensitive to picking up vibrations. So for instance, if I'm in the boat and I was cooking away, and then I would know that the boat wasn't, for instance, sailing that well, you could just tell from the vibrations. So these are things that you use to help you navigate your way around. Also, there was something else relied on. When my hands were dry, that was an indicator that the weather was usually quite good. When my hands were wet or damp, that would usually be an indicator that there was adverse weather conditions on the way. I think you rely on a lot of personal knowledge, experience, and because I've been on the sea for many years, even just by looking at the waves, you can read the waves, so you can see the difference in the waves. That might indicate whether you're going to be approaching some decent weather, some good weather, or some adverse weather. So you do rely on experience, knowledge, and these things to help you on these journeys.
Solo sailors can often feel very alone. What did you turn to for comfort?
Yes, that question has probably been asked more than any other question, but for me, I didn't experience any loneliness. For me, I was really happy in my element on the water. I didn't experience that. I know that it's quite common with other sailors who say that, but for me, I was so busy looking forward to the challenge. I mean, there's times when I can be walking through a city centre and I feel lonely, but when I'm at sea, that's just something that I don't tend to experience at all. When it's calm, when the conditions are calm, for me that's great because it gives me more time to catch up with sleep, or for instance to carry out necessary repairs to the boat. So it gives me some time to relax also, so it's definitely not something that I worry about.
What was the biggest challenge?
On the Southern Ocean, there were particularly hairy moments. So that's where I encountered some of the biggest waves I had ever seen, and you need to make sure that you're on top of your game, because there were 1 or 2 occasions where the boat did capsize. Thankfully, on each of those occasions, I managed to erect the boat correctly and not encounter any damage to the mast. When I went past Cape Horn, that was a particularly good day. It was nothing compared to, I think, what other people have experienced in the past. But when I was near the Azores, that was a particularly hairy moment. I had approached a period of high pressure, and there were some serious squalls which were particularly strong, and particularly for me I found quite a struggle. So I think there's different parts of the journey which are more tricky than others.
Would you recommend sailing as a good sport for other deaf people?
Oh yes, absolutely yes. I would like to see more deaf people involved in the sport, particularly young deaf children, young deaf kids, to encourage them to participate in the sport. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for young deaf kids, and I think that they could become very skillful sailors themselves, because they're very sensitive to, for instance, weather conditions, and I think racing is something I would like to see young deaf kids being involved in. When I used to do racing myself, and there's the 470 or the 420, I can't recall which one it was quite a while ago now. I think I must have been around 20 at the time, and I was involved in sailing racing at that time, and there was a hearing crew, but communication as part of that crew was one of the challenges, and I think that if we managed to put together a deaf crew, then because everybody's conversing with a common language, which would be BSL, I think that we could definitely compete with hearing people. That particular event no longer takes place, but I definitely feel as though deaf people have the capability to compete, and I think because they rely on other senses, because they don't have hearing, then that might actually give them a slight advantage in terms of reading the waves and reading the wind, so in terms of judging the speed of the boat. So I definitely feel as though that's something I would like to see, is just trying to create or encourage more deaf people into our sport.
The RYA is going to present the RYA Sailability Personal Endeavour Trophy every year. How does it feel to be inspiring other disabled people to achieve their dreams?
Absolutely fantastic. It feels great, and I think it's about time that it's been recognised. Members of the deaf community have struggled for many years, and I think we have been ignored, overlooked in many instances in comparison to people who are able-bodied. So I think that the fact that this award has been given, I think it's now time for the deaf community to move on, to be more active, to be more involved in the world. We don't need people to hold our hands and guide us through life. I think we need to be more proactive, and I think this is maybe one way of just demonstrating that to the wider community. So I am absolutely ecstatic. I am very pleased personally.